going, it meant what? That he was getting older. But the older we grow, while everybody around us realizes we're getting old, we are the last people to realize or admit we're getting old. Isn't it true? Whenever you pass by a mirror, no matter how old you are, you will still look at yourself. Of course, you make sure others don't see you, but you will still look at yourself. And I remember my spiritual master always telling me that in everybody's heart, everybody genuinely believes that he's actually more handsome than the person next to him. We will always try to be humble and say, no, actually you are very beautiful. But in our hearts we say, actually when I look at myself from this angle, I look better than you. When I actually turn my head and tilt at this angle, I look incredibly handsome. Because if we didn't feel that, we will feel deflated. And even though the hair is going, mine is. Even though the teeth will go, even though the face is looking very bad, in our hearts of hearts, we still feel young. And that's when it becomes very embarrassing. Not to everyone else, that is also there. But we embarrass ourselves because we forget that time is passing. And what we were before is not what we are now. You know, 20 years ago you could have fitted into the jeans. 20 years later, you can't fit into it. The jeans is trying to fit into you. But it's not working. But you say, never mind. And you walk around looking like a complete fool while thinking that you're still looking very nice. This is how Puranjana lived. He thought that 100 years meant I would have 100 years of eternal youth. And I will enjoy and enjoy and enjoy. But he forgot that his span of life was being reduced without profit. Scriptures tell us that Puranjana was very advanced in intelligence, very sharp in mind. In fact, most of us are like that. That's why we're in NUS. But he did not realize that he was completely under the mind and intelligence control and not the other way around. He did not have control over his mind. He did not have control over the intelligence. Because he thought, I am the mind and I am the intelligence. He could not understand what was the true meaning of life. And he didn't care for it. And in doing so, like every one of us, he lived a normal life, so to speak. Of course, we don't have 1,100 sons, and we don't have 110 daughters. But the story goes that he had so many children. And once he had children, and once he had his wife, in this way he passed his life. And life kept going and going and going. But did Puranjana attain satisfaction in the city of the 9 gates? No. That's why he kept going despite his old age to a gate every day. And every day after he finished the gate, the next day, he was ready to satisfy his desires again because they could not be satisfied. They could not be satisfied. And so Puranjana lived for 100 years. And now, I like this shot. Puranjana lived for 100 years and he thought that he would live for 100 more. But there was a king from a neighboring kingdom who was watching very quietly. His name, Bhagavatam tells us, is Chandavega. Chandavega in Sanskrit means very swiftly passing away. You're getting the drift, I think. Chandavega had a very powerful army of Gandharva soldiers. There were 360 of them who were male, 360 female soldiers. In those days, national service was for both genders. And they were equally strong, right? So 360 on this side, 360 on that side, very powerful army. Chandavega had been watching the city of the 9 gates. And he was watching carefully the activities of Puranjan. When you see someone else smiling and you are not smiling, how do you feel? You want to make sure either that person stops smiling or you start smiling, isn't it? In this case, Chandavega thought, this man is enjoying so much and he's enjoying for a long time. Let me plunder the city and take what he has. Because this is the nature of the world. No one is happy if you are happy. Chandavega then decides, let's go one night. So one night he launches an attack. He descends into the city of the 9 gates. And there he is met by the snake with the 5 hoods. The snake with the 5 hoods starts fighting. It fights very hard and it begins to defend the city. Chandavega thinks, this is a very powerful snake, but I have more armory and ammunition up my sleeves. Chandavega then says, let's take him on, and for 100 years the battle goes. 100 years. And as the 100 years are going, the serpent is weakened. Puranjana and his family realizes that they are under attack. What happens to them? They become anxious. When your body or your state is under attack, you become anxious. Not for the state or the body, but more reason for that you will lose what you have had and you will lose your enjoyment. That was the reason why Puranjana was wounded. Chandavega now had 2 or 3 very powerful weapons besides his Ganduva soldiers. What does he do? He has a daughter. His daughter is known as Jara. Jara in Sanskrit means old age. Jara had this wonderful effect. The moment she touches anyone or embraces anybody, that person will feel very weak. Isn't that what old age does to all of us? So Jara was very powerful. But you know, Jara was unmarried. And when she came into the city, she looked around asking for a husband. But nobody wants to marry old age, isn't it? Everybody wants to marry youth. And although nobody agreed to accept her, just like nobody agrees to accept old age, she came nevertheless. And in that way, the things that we don't want in life also, they also come. We can't stop them. So now, Bhaya was the next person to come in. Because what happened was, she was looking around and she saw a person whom she became very attracted to. And that person was another king. And the king's name was Bhaya. Bhaya in Sanskrit simply means fear. So, old age requests fear that, can I get married to you? Bhaya is fear personified. But even fear is fearful of old age. So Bhaya says, no thank you, Jara. You know, I don't want to marry you, but I have a brother. My brother's name is Rajvan. And his name is the meaning. The meaning is very important. The meaning of his name is the high fever that comes to us at the point of death. The point when the temperatures of the body reaches very high before we leave this body. So Bhaya introduced Jara to his brother. Yes, to his brother. And they get married. Now that the formalities are over, they look to the city and Chandavega now attacks. Jara walks into the city. All the inhabitants become weak. When Bhaya walks behind her, all the inhabitants of the city, what happens to them? They become fearful and anxious. And at that point of time, when this high fever arrives into the city, the great snake who was defending the city is now set on fire because of the high temperatures. And when you set a snake on fire, the snake runs out from the snake hole. And in the same way, the snake abandoned the city. And when he abandoned the city, Puranjana became very, very upset. Jara came up to Puranjana's palace. She finds him and she embraces him. This is one embrace Puranjana does not want, but he has to accept. And he accepts the embrace, and when that embrace comes, Puranjana loses his beauty. He loses his perpetual propensity to enjoy. He loses the power of his youth. He loses the power of his enjoyment. And he's conquered beyond his liking. He's conquered favorably, forcibly. What happens now? Puranjana is at deathbed. But even at his deathbed, the story says, he still cannot stop thinking about what happens to my wife and my family members. It is natural. When we are on our deathbed, which will be at some point, we will also think about our loved ones. And that's what Puranjana did. And all he could think about was his relatives, his friends, and all the things that he had kept for so long that was precious to him. But guess what? The story tells us that Puranjana found that his wife, his family, his relatives, they had become cold and indifferent to him. They were distancing themselves slowly from him because they could not save him from what was going to happen. Puranjana, in desperation, tries to run out of the city, but Chandavega drags him with a noose and a rope. You can see This is a very powerful representation. Puranjana is dragged forcibly, and at that point, the serpent also leaves the city, and the whole city collapses. As Puranjana dies, he remembers only that which he hankered for all his life. Material enjoyment in the form of that one person whom he was attracted to, his wife, his companion. And at that point of time, out of gross ignorance, the story reminds us that he forgot his well-wisher. He forgot Abhignata, even though his well-wisher was still with him. That is the end of Puranjana, but it's not the end of the story. Puranjana dies, and because Bhagavad Gita tells us that at the point of your death, whatever is the state of your consciousness, that consciousness you will attain. So Puranjana was remembering his wife, and in his next life, he becomes a lady. So all men who remember their wives, in next life, they will become not wives maybe, but they will definitely become ladies. If you remember a particular object that you are really thinking of, in the next life, that is what you will get. My spiritual master had a nice way of saying it. He told me, if the last person you remember in your life is your wife, next life will become sari. If the last person you remember is your husband, next life will become pants or dhoti. And in that way, Puranjana becomes Puranjani. Easy to remember. He becomes a she. But in the next life, Puranjana becomes a queen in the house of a pious king. This king is known as King Vidarbha. Eventually, as she grows up, she is married to a very pious and powerful devotee king known as Malayadhwaj. Malayadhwaj was a great devotee of the Supreme Lord. After performing all his kingly duties, he retires into the forest, and there he sits down to fulfill his true purpose of life, to find out his true existence and the true meaning of who he is. He sits down to finally contemplate about his eternal connection with the Supreme. Puranjani, who is now the wife of Malayadhwaj, being a faithful wife, she follows him also. She has got nice association of a pious king. Association is very important, isn't it? When you are in the company of drunkards, chances are you will become a drunkard. If you are in the company of saints, chances are you will become a saint. That is the power of association. So, in the same way, Puranjani was associating with a great and pious devotee, and therefore she also became a devotee. Under his guidance and under his instructions, the queen became fixed on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Malayadhwaj, now what happens? He became very fixed and became very concentrated on the worship of the Lord. The queen serves him very nicely. And before they leave for the forest, they have 7 sons who are very pious, and they have 1 daughter, which very interestingly is described as one who has very black eyes and single in vision. This all sounds very mysterious, but they will become very clear in a while. After having children and settling all their family affairs, king and queen retire to the forest. There, with great austerity and devotion, Malayadhwaj leaves his body and he dies. And when he dies, the queen remains engaged in service, but she is now alone in the forest. If you were left alone in the forest and your husband or wife had left you, what would you do? That's what the queen did. She began to lament. She began to cry. And she felt separation from her husband. As she was crying, someone comes into the jungle, a Brahmana, right? A very pious looking person walks into the jungle. And the story goes that he comes up to her and he asks her this question: "My dear friend, do you not recognize who I am? Why are you crying here? Whose wife, whose daughter are you? Who were you previously? It appears as if you are lamenting for a dead body. But what is the point of lamenting for that which is not there? Don't you recognize who I am? Don't you know that I am your eternal friend? Don't you know that life after life I have been there with you? But because you are so caught up with everything and anything which is temporary, you have never ever actually looked to me. Instead, you have ignored me. Now, the Brahmana gives very wonderful advice as the voice of the super soul in the heart of the queen. What does he say? He says that even though you cannot recognize me, even though you can't recognize and remember that in the past you had an intimate friend, I remember you. Unfortunately, you gave up my company because I was not useful for your sense enjoyment. Because you wanted everything that was temporary, and in doing so, you became deceived and you became poor. You lived in a city in your previous life. That city had 9 gates. It had 5 gardens. It had 1 protector. It had 3 apartments. It had 6 families. It had 5 stores, 5 material elements, and 1 woman who was the lord of the house. And now, this Brahmana goes on to explain to Puranjana what was his previous life. He says, my dear friend, the 5 gardens are the 5 objects of your sense enjoyment. The protector, the serpent, is actually your life air. It passes through the 9 gates. The 3 apartments that I spoke about is actually none other than fire, water, and earth. And the 6 families that I spoke about are the total of your mind and your 5 senses. The 5 stories, the 5 stores, they are your working organs. They transact business through the combined forces of the 5 elements which are internal. And behind all these activities is the soul. And that is who you really are. And now, Puranjana is told by this great friend, actually, you are not the daughter of the king. Nor are you this particular man who was in his last life known as Puranjana. Actually, you are not married to this well-wishing husband. Because you have had husbands many times. You have had children many times. You have had daughters and sons many times. My dear friend, the only relationship you have is the relationship between you and me. I am the super soul. And you are the individual soul. And as the super soul, I am in your heart. Wherever you go, I am the voice of your conscience. And if I am the voice of your conscience, then it is from me remembrance, memory, and knowledge come. So the $1 million question, which I'm sure you can see a very famous personality pointing his finger at you, is who exactly is Puranjan? Who is he? After this conversation that Puranjan had as Puranjani with this mysterious Brahmana, who is Puranjan? The question is very simple, and the answer is equally simple. Puranjana is actually all of us. That's who he is. The word Puranjan simply means one who inhabits the city known as the body. The body is actually the city of the 9 gates. We all have 9 gates to our body. You have your eyes, your nose, you have your nostrils, you have all your pores, you have your organs of generation, your organs of evacuation. These are all holes. They are all entry points. And through your eyes you enjoy, through your ears you enjoy, through your mouth you enjoy. That's the only function of the 9 gates, or so it appears to be. The beautiful lady that Puranjana met, who is she? She is none other than intelligence. She looked lost, do you remember? Because intelligence which is not fixed on permanent object of happiness will always be lost. It will be misdirected. Who was the chief servant of intelligence? The mind. The mind's nature is to be influenced by intelligence. And the moment the influence of intelligence is on the mind becomes so powerful that it has all the other senses, the 5 senses, which are knowledge acquiring and which are gross. The 5 senses expand And they all connect with each other to bring about different ways of enjoying in this world. So you have the servants of the mind, you have the intelligence, and finally right at the back, the serpent is your life force in your body. Every one of us has a life force. Otherwise, what's the difference between a dead body and a live body? If you see someone you love dying, and when you see the person has died, nobody in their right mind will ever sit with the dead body for the rest of their life, even though that dead body was a person you loved very much. Why? Because your conscience and your soul tells you that the body was not the object of your happiness. It was the person who inhabited the body that gave you happiness. That is the key. That's why we remember our grandmothers, our fathers, our mothers. Why? What do we remember about them? We remember about how they lived. We remember about how they were conscious. But we do not attach ourselves to their bodies. That's the difference. So the serpent is the life force. The body is the city. The intelligence is the lady. It could be a man even. It's just allegorical. But where intelligence tells the soul to move, the soul will move. Puranjana is actually the living entity. Puranjana is the true position of who we are. And we are all spirit souls. So what is the conclusion to this very interesting story? We started out by talking about temptations. Everything that we are tempted by in this world will never last. And because it doesn't last, it has the ability to deceive us into thinking that we will get something permanent. But if we really want something permanent, then the first thing we have to do is realize that a life which is deceived by temptation is actually a life which has no end. Why? Because you're putting a bet on something which will never last. What will last? The Gita declares that this world cannot last forever. It says the nature of this world is actually dukhalayam ashashvatam. That means it is a place of misery and anxiety. The more you try to invest in this world, the more frustrated you become. And you keep trying like Puranjana tried. But in the end, when you are going to die, you will realize that all the efforts that Puranjana put would end up in misery. Just like Alexander realized at the point of his death that whatever he worked so hard for will finally leave him. And that which will not leave him, he never worked hard for. This is the irony of deceiving ourselves that we are tempted. When Chandavega comes into our life, he comes in the form of old age. You heard that Chandavega was battling with Puranjana and the city for 100 years. It didn't mean he lived another 100 years. It meant that the moment you are born, you are already growing old. Isn't it true? Even scientifically, your cells die and regenerate. Nobody says how old you are. How old are you, Prabhu? And you say, I'm 24 years young. We just don't even have that in our culture. We actually say, I'm 10 years old. Because we recognize, the soul recognizes. The moment you are born, you will have to fight the onslaught of old age. And that's what Chandavega did. As time he comes and he passes swiftly through us. Isn't it true that it was just a while ago you all were in your primary schools? Isn't it true that it was just a while ago you all had hair on your head? Isn't it true that it was just a while ago you could fit into something and now you can't? Time flies. Time flies. Because it is Chandavega. And when time flies, Jara must come. Jara is old age. And old age is something you don't embrace. But she likes to embrace you nevertheless. That's her duty. And when she does that, you will become weak. Those who are older, I think you will bear witness to the fact that what used to be simple things have now become very difficult things. I remember my grandfather telling me that just taking a simple step when you're very old can be like climbing the Himalayas. That is how old age overtakes us. Jara comes, Bhaya also comes. When we grow old, all the enjoyment that we wanted to do is slowly leaving us. It brings fear and anxiety. It makes us anxious that that which we have, we are going to lose. We don't realize we are already losing. We are already losing. And where there is Here, where there is old age, where there is time, there must come death. And when death comes, just like Chandalega, if we remember all the things that we wanted, but which were temporary, and if we forgot our well-wisher, the Supreme Lord, then in the next life, we will have to take birth again and go through the same cycle over and over and over. Is that all there is to life? Just doing the same things over and over again? Is this the Russian roulette of life? That one day you are happy, next day you're not, next day you're happy, one day you're not. If you're satisfied with that, then you are utterly deceived. If you're tempted to find out if there's something more, then you have 5 minutes more with me. What shall it be? Well, at this moment, everyone is looking quite all right. So let's conclude what we want to understand from Puranjana. A life deceived by temptation is a life without value. But a life that deceives temptation is a life with value. You realize that Puranjana in his next life was given a chance to find out the true meaning of life. Who gave him that chance? Avijñata, his well-wishing friend. He is the one who provided an opportunity for Puranjana to come into contact with a pious family, to be married to a king who could understand the true purpose of his life. Did Puranjana lose anything by getting married to a king? No. But she did not get attached to the objects which previously she was. She now became attached to the instructions of the king to concentrate on the true purpose of life. And in that way, because her association was good, Puranjana conquered her intelligence and conquered her mind. And therefore, the end result was Avijñata revealed himself to her. And that is the secret to how we can deceive temptation and not the other way around. When we come in contact with the devotees of the Lord, who remember the Lord and know that there is a purpose of life which is higher than just the temporary nature of the world, then we become like what Puranjana became in the 49. And because he got in association with the devotee, he became purified. And because she became purified, even though the king died, Avijñata came to her rescue to be her companion. That is a very important point for us. The 7 sons of the queen and the king are known as the 7 processes by which we can come out of these temptations. Just like temptations have 6 cousins, the way to come out of temptation is to take up 7 different weapons to defeat the 6 cousins. And what are the 7? To hear about the Supreme Lord, to chant the Supreme Lord's names, to remember about the Supreme Lord, to offer worship to the Supreme Lord, to offer prayers to the Supreme Lord, to render service which is loving, and to serve His lotus feet. Does it matter that you have to be a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian? Bhagavad Gita never uses the word Hindu. In all 700 texts, the word Hindu is never found. In all of the Vedas and the Upanishads and all the scriptures, the word Hindu does not exist. Because we are not in the business of segregating humanity from God. God is God. He may take different names, different forms, across different parts of the world. But worship of the good Lord is always going to allow us to deceive temptation. That is the key. So, the only change that came to Puranjani was not a change in lifestyle. We're not asking you to now drop everything and drop your wives and your children and please go back. This is not my message, right? If I did that, I think you would never come back to me and your families would probably sue me. But that's not going to happen. All that the Bhagavad Gita tells you to do, if you want permanent happiness, and if you do not want to be tempted and deceived, is to just change your consciousness. That's all. Someone can be in the office working. He can be a devotee or he can be a non-devotee. If he's Puranjana, he will work and work and work to get the results of the work. But you will realize that the results of the work sometimes slap you, sometimes reward you. The devotee Puranjani will work differently. She will work in such a way that she will work to please the Supreme Lord, because in her heart, the Supreme Lord is the Supreme Boss, the Supreme Employer. It's just a change of intellect and consciousness. Bhagavad Gita tells us a person who does that, he is free from karma, he is free from attachment, and he is natural around. That is why you have this prayer, which is beautifully stated by a great personality from Bhagavatam, known as Pingala. Pingala was a lady of high society. Her business was only to satisfy men. She tried very hard for years and years to gain recognition from all her clients. But at the end of it, when she became old, they all left her. She thought that they were coming to her because she was of value. But when they left her, she realized that the only thing they wanted was something temporary. And therefore she prays at the end of her life that I'm such a fool that I've given up the service of that person who was actually always in my heart. But instead of that, I was running after everything and anything which was never my well-wisher. And instead of getting real happiness, I found I could never satisfy my desire. And I found that I was always unhappy, anxious, fearful, lamenting, and always in illusion. The result, because Puranjani was pure and sincere, when her husband died, the Supreme Lord was so attracted to her sincerity that he came and he gave her real intelligence. Not material intelligence, but real intelligence. So what is our royal road to happiness? Everyone wants to be happy. Bhagavad Gita says you can become happy. All you have to do is follow 266. One who is not connected with the Supreme, he cannot have transcendental intelligence and he cannot have a steady mind. This is what Krishna declares. If you want your mind to be steady, become connected to that which is permanently steady. If you want lights in this room, make sure the source of that energy is permanent. Otherwise it will go. And at that last point, Krishna emphatically states, if you have an unsteady mind, there is no possibility of peace. And when there is no possibility of peace, how can you be happy? It's not possible. It is not possible. The one question I anticipate someone will ask me, and that's how I'm going to close today. Do we have to give up family? Do we have to give up loved ones? Do we have to give up wealth? Because Puranjana had all of this. So do we have to give all this up, renounce everything, wear the saffron robe, and sit in some part of Himalayas or some place very far away? Bhagavad Gita doesn't tell us to do that at all. In fact, Arjuna wanted to do that, right? You know the Bhagavad Gita. What did Arjuna want? He didn't want to fight. He said, no, I want to resign, retire, I want to go to a cave and sit down and become sadhu. But what did Krishna tell him? Krishna said, no, nothing doing. You are going to fight because it's your duty to fight. But you're not going to fight because you want to fight. Because if you do that, you'll be attached to the results of your fighting and you will just go up and down in your life. Instead, you will fight because it is my arrangement. Mayai vaite nihata purva evam nimitta matra bhavya savya sachi. You will fight because it is my transcendental arrangement that I want all the demoniac forces of this world to be vanquished. And I want righteousness to be established. You fight for the satisfaction of the Supreme. In other words, we are all on the battlefield. We all have to be students, professors. We have to be doing our work. Puranjana's story doesn't tell you to resign. It tells you to resign from your misdirected intelligence and to please retire your unsteady mind. But it actually tells you to become connected to the Supreme Intelligence. Then you will become peaceful. All you have to do is just add the Supreme Lord to whatever you do. And what is the simplest way to do that? That's what we're going to do after this. The simplest way to do that today, to connect with the Supreme, is to chant the transcendental vibrations of His name. Chanting the names of the good Lord is something that all major faiths do. And when we do that, it is amazing. Why? Because transcendental vibration means the moment you chant the name of the Lord, that name is on your tongue. If I asked you now to chant Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola for 10 minutes, like I said just now, you will run out of BLT. But if I ask you to chant a mantra which has the holy name of the Lord, for example, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. You'll find you can keep chanting that, and you'll find that you will not get tired. That is how to connect. All you have to do is start your day with that connection, and then do everything else that is part of your duty. This is the wisdom of the Gita. It doesn't tell you to run away, but it tells you simply to become a devotee, to become Puranjani and not to become Puranjana. Time is of the essence. I will ask you two things. Today we spoke about temptations. We spoke about the true goal of life. We also spoke about the fact that when you are tempted to move away from the true goal of life, you will find instead of real happiness, you will most probably find frustration, you will most probably find anger, you will most probably find a lot of anxiety. But if you decide that you want to take a journey towards genuine peace and bliss, then you will find that this peace will last longer than the temporary happiness. So what should we do? Should we just stop this, go home, think about it, and next morning when we wake up, it's just become another presentation? If that's the case, you have wasted your time, I have wasted mine. Then this entire exercise is nothing more than a ritual. Don't make it into a ritual. You're all here for a reason. You're not here by accident. You're here by arrangement. It is not that I'm just speaking a topic off the cuff. The topic has come for a reason. Embrace it. Think about it. But the only way you're going to know whether it works or not is not to keep talking about it. You and I can talk about this till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, until you practice it and try it, you will not know. I leave you with two very short stories which I like. And I'm sure you will take them with you also. The first is very interesting. There were three men and they were waiting a whole day under a mango tree. They were waiting for that ripe mango to drop from the tree. But it didn't. All of a sudden there was a gust of wind and there was a myna bird that settles on that same branch where the mango was, and the mango drops. The three men's goal all along has been to taste the mango, right? Otherwise, why stand under a tree? The mango has dropped, they should be tasting it. But the first man says, can I ask you a question before you taste that mango? What do you think caused the mango to drop? The second man said, well, I think it was the force of the bird sitting on the branch, the mango dropped. The other man said, I disagree. I think it was the force of the wind and it caused the mango to get dislodged from the branch. The third man said, I disagree with both of you. I think, technically speaking, it was a combination of the weight of the myna bird together with the wind, and the branch let the mango go. And they went up and down arguing and arguing about what was probably the right reason. A little boy or a little girl walks across and she sees a mango on the floor. She looks at the mango and looks at the three adults, very intelligent adults, having a wonderful argument about why the mango dropped. She picks up the mango, she bites into it and says, man, this is good. And she takes the mango and goes. We should be like that little child. We can argue and argue about why this, why that, when, how, but you will never know how a mango is going to be until you taste it. The last story is about urgency. We always tell ourselves, isn't it? The day will come when I will read the Gita. That day is coming, don't worry. After I finish my exams, right, I will sit down and read the Gita. Then later you will say, you know, after exams I have this. And now I will wait till retirement when I withdraw my CPF and I have nothing better to do. Then I will sit down and read the Gita. One day there was a boy who was very, very interested in reading the Gita. So he comes to this guru and he tells the guru, please, my dear sir, can you teach me to read the Gita? Can you teach me how to become connected to Krishna? And the guru says, very simple. You see this tree here? All you have to do is sit under the tree, open the Gita and start reading it. So he says, all right, I'll do that. So what he does is, he sits down to read the Gita. The guru tells him one thing, whatever you do, only read the Gita, don't do anything else. He says, yeah, that's all I want to do, I only want to read the Gita. So he sits down. He's very simple. He has only one dhoti. He washes it, dries it, gets another, puts on a cowpin, and after that he puts it on. One morning, he gets up and he sees that his dhoti has holes. And he thinks there must be rats around the jungle. And that's why the dhoti has holes. Now, if there are holes, I need to find another dhoti. I have to wash it. I don't have time to read the Gita. I need to read the Gita. So what do? I need to make sure that there are no rats anymore. The best way to take care of the rats is to get a cat. So what does he do? Goes to the marketplace and gets a cat. The cat takes care of the rat. The boy feels, I've got a dhoti, I can sit down and read the Gita. But now the cat, needs to be maintained. So in the nights, the cat is meowing and meowing because it needs milk. So the boy is asking himself, how am I supposed to have the time to get milk for the cat? I'm supposed to read the Gita. So I'll do one thing. I'll go to the market and get a cow. If I keep a cow, I can milk it, and I can get the milk and give it to the cat will take care of the rat, and I can sit down and read the Gita. I will be focused. So he goes to the marketplace and get a cow. Anyone has maintained a cow before? If you have, you realize it is not as easy as it seems. Cows require a lot of love, a lot of care. You can't just, hey, give me milk. It's not going to happen. So then he realizes, my God, it's a high maintenance thing, to take care of a cow, take care of the cat. How am I going to find time to read the Gita? I think now that the household is becoming set up, I should settle down and get a wife. If I get married, my wife, I can take care of her, she will take care of the cow, cow will take care of the cat will take care of the rat, and I will have time to read the Gita. So of course he doesn't go to a marketplace to get married. He gets married, and she's a good wife, and he settles down, and he wants to read the Gita when his wife tells him, excuse me, sitting down under a tree and reading the Gita is not going to give us a house. I can't live under a tree. We're going to have children. We need to take care of things. You have to be practical. And he thinks, if I'm practical, take care of the wife is all right, children are all right, cow is all right, cat is all right, rat won't bite into my dhoti, I can then sit down and read the Gita. So he gets married, he has an entire farm, he's taking care of everything very nicely, and 1 year has passed and the sadhu comes back. He's eagerly waiting to see that disciple sitting under that tree reading the Gita. And he walks up to that tree and he thought, maybe I came to the wrong city. Because here, I see a village community now. I see children running around, I see a wife walking around, I see cows, I see cats, I see animals. And then he sees this boy coming up to him and falling at his feet and saying, Guru Maharaj, I'm so happy to see you. Maharaj says, what happened to reading the Gita? And he said, the boy looks at him very happy and says, this is exactly what I've done to read the Gita. And he said, have you read the Gita? He said, no. What have you been doing? I'm preparing to read the Gita. How long will we be preparing? How long will we be preparing to read the Gita? That's the question we have to ask. Are we going to wait till everything is settled? Because in life, nothing is settled. Are you going to wait till the perfect day comes? You and I know there is no such thing as a perfect day. Do not be deceived. The greatest temptation in this world It's the temptation that tells you, don't read the Gita. Thank you very much.